Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we enter the third week of the government shutdown. The world is watching. As our troops continue to fight terrorism in Afghanistan, we can be certain that our nation enemies are watching too. The clock is ticking. Government officials have stated that if a solution is not achieved by November 1, veterans will not receive their VA benefits. Disabled veterans are rightfully worried as they watch the days go by without progress towards a solution. All they have been told is at the end of this month, their disability and pension payments, which they are due from under the law, could disappear. It is inexcusable that this failure to govern has disproportionately impacted U.S. military veterans and their families. For many disabled veterans, the ability to pay rent, buy food, and keep gas in a car depends on VA disability compensation and pensions. The clock is also ticking for young veterans whose GI Bill benefits are threatened. For many of them, the promise of a college education was all the motivation they needed to dedicate a portion of their lives to wartime military service. Now, they are told their GI Bill benefits will evaporate by November 1 if nothing is resolved in Washington. The time for debate is over. One young veteran of a post-9/11 generation expressed her dismay over the situation with these words: "I wouldn't have agreed to go to Afghanistan to help repair someone else's government if I knew when I got back that I would return to a dysfunctional and broken one of my own." The American Legion has replaced its national website with a special report focusing entirely on the government shutdown, how it stands to affect veterans, military retirees, and others. At the top of the website is a clock, and it is counting down towards November 1st. The clock has been ticking for years in Denver, Orlando, and New Orleans, where long-delayed VA hospital construction projects will certainly be idled unless there is a solution to fund their completion. Long-awaited promises by VA will at least be delayed, if not broken. As the shutdown grinds on, the backlog of undecided VA benefit claims can only be expected to grow. This is especially disappointing, given that progress was finally being made in this year, thanks to the efforts and dedication by American Legion service officers and claims processors at regional offices that are now closed throughout the country. The clock is ticking towards a crisis for American veterans and our national security. Health care and disability payments for veterans is long-term cost of war. At least we forget America remains at war. What does this government shutdown say to our troops in harm's way? What is the message this shutdown sends to Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups who have been simply waiting for Americans to lose interest in the war on terrorism? The terrorists are also waiting for the clock to tick to zero. Today, as we enter the third week of unprecedented failure by our elected leaders, I implore them to fund the government and end the shutdown now. It is an embarrassment to our nation. It is a cruelty to veterans and their families. As both sides of the debate negotiate this week, I repeat the message I delivered October 4th, where veterans were denied access to the National World War II Memorial built in their honor. Our nation's elected officials on both sides of the aisle must stop putting politics ahead of patriotism and do their jobs. The welfare of our nation veterans and their families must not be used as playing pieces in a game of who's going to blink first in Washington. If specified legislation must be introduced and passed to protect veterans and their families, as was the case of the military pay protection, Congress must introduce and pay such legislation, and the President must sign it into law. Consider the message we are sending to young people thinking of joining the armed forces if our nation stops paying for education benefits under the GI Bill. Consider the message we are sending to our enemies in the global war on terrorism. Washington must not let the clock at the top of the American Legion website tick to zero. The men and women most threatened by the shutdown are the most patriotic among us, veterans and military families. As you might suspect, American Legion National Headquarters has been besieged with questions and concerns from veterans throughout the country. One came from a disabled veteran whose husband, also a disabled veteran, is now a furloughed civilian employee of the U.S. Army. Just in weeks' time, this couple faces losing all income if VA disability benefits disappear at the end of the month. At the end of her email, she simply says, "Some thanks for serving your country honorably." Another disabled veteran wrote to say that he was finally prescribed a service dog. In the event the shutdown continues, he is certain he won't get the dog. More than that, he simply asked, "How am I supposed to pay my bills and my rent?" A National Guardsman, whose orders have been suspended until the shutdown ends, has no other employment. He has lost his TRICARE coverage and his income. "My family will be in a very severe financial state," he said. A wounded warrior looking forward to a U.S. Navy hiring and support conference in Raleigh, North Carolina this week just found out that due to government shutdown, the conference is postponed until March or April. In announcing the postponement, the lieutenant commander ended with, "Thank you for your flexibility." Put yourself in a wounded warrior's place. His career event is postponed by at least 6 months. At the same time, his VA disability benefits are in peril of disappearing altogether. The clock ticks towards November 1 for all of them and for all of us. Between now and the end of this month, I am calling upon American Legion members nationwide and patriotic Americans everywhere to step forward and hold their elected officials accountable for this failure. Every one of them is responsible for this shutdown, regardless of party, chamber of Congress, or place in the administration. With nearly 2.4 million members of the American Legion is America's Veterans Service Organization. As such, we demand a solution that stops exploiting those who served in uniform to achieve political ends. We demand that Congress fund the government now and put an end to this shutdown. Thank you.